Hello, I'm Beth Britton. I support Dementia Community with their communications work. Welcome and thank you for joining us for our first March webinar. Before we get into the topic for today, I just wanted to briefly explain a little bit more about Dementia Community. Dementia Community is a charitable community benefit society, a membership cooperative that provides learning and networking opportunities for the dementia care community. We are an independent voice and inclusive organisation helping all of our members to feel connected, informed, inspired, empowered and engaged in co-produced changes that improve everyone's experiences of dementia, both in care and in wider society. This webinar is just one example of the many ways in which we do this. Community members own a £1 share in Dementia Community and membership is open to everyone. So if you aren't already a member, do join us. You can use the QR code on the screen or the link in the chat to visit our membership page. And if you're having any difficulties with that, do contact myself or David on the call today to support you with that. I'd also like to highlight a really exciting opportunity to join us in person on the 3rd of June 2025 at M-Shed in Bristol for our Creative Dementia Arts for Health and Wellbeing conference. This is a one-day event showcasing best practice in working with people living with dementia using creative arts. Please use the QR code on the screen or the link in the chat to find out more information, and we look forward to seeing you there. So without further ado, then let's get on to today's webinar. So our topic today is caring for dementia and continence. I will introduce you to our speakers shortly, but just some brief housekeeping first. We are recording this webinar, so if you don't want your face on the recording, please turn your camera off. Please use the chat for your questions. Our presenters are planning on providing you with an ethical dilemma about halfway through their presentation, so make sure you're all ready and waiting to go with your responses to that, and they are happy to take some questions afterwards as well. We will be keeping an eye on the chat, and you will be able to have some live participation if you would like to. You will be able to come off mute to ask your question yourself. Just indicate if you would like to do that. Afterwards, my colleague David will email you the slides. The recording will also go onto our YouTube channel, Dementia Community, so do look out for that. And we will also ask you to complete a feedback form. We'd be really grateful if you would do that. It helps to improve our learning as an organisation and to format the future of our webinar programme as well. So let's get started. Our speakers for today are Professor Cathy Murphy, who is a Professor of Continence, and Dr. Barbara Bradbury, Senior Research Fellow, School of Health Sciences at the University of Southampton. Cathy and Barbara, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much for the invitation to speak here today. We're really looking forward to it. So I'm going to start off by sharing my slides, if I can. And hopefully that's... Is that sharing?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, all good. Right, let me just double check my controls before I make a start. Lovely. So as Beth said, my name is Cathy Murphy and I'm a nurse by background, as well as a Professor of Continence in the School of Health Sciences at the University of Southampton. And the key focus of our research is finding better ways to support continence care for people living at home with dementia, and also for their carers. Now, I lead this programme with a wonderful team of colleagues at Southampton, King's College London and elsewhere, and that includes Barbara, who's going to be talking shortly. And Barbara and I are sharing this webinar between us. We also work with a fantastic range of stakeholders, including people living with dementia, carers, home care workers, and many, many others. And today I'm going to be providing an overview of the experiences of carers, and by that I mean unpaid family and friend carers, with providing continence care for people living with dementia, including considering one of the most common ethical dilemmas experienced. And that is how to balance the often conflicting needs of the person with dementia and their family carer when the person with dementia doesn't recognise or perhaps recall their continence problems. And then Barbara's going to be moving on to talk about work that we've done in this area and what's underway and what we're trying to do to support people. And I should say from the start that unfortunately there are very rarely any easy black or white solutions to these problems, which are often highly complex and challenging, but hopefully the tools we're developing will be of some help. Right, just to start off with a little bit of background. So why focus on people with dementia when we're thinking about incontinence? Why would we need a different approach to continence care for this particular population? Firstly, people who have dementia are at significantly higher risk of experiencing toilet use or continence problems than people of the same age who don't have dementia. They're about 3 times more likely to experience urinary incontinence and 5 times more likely to experience fecal incontinence. And this is because people with dementia may have the same physical causes of incontinence, whether that's prolapse or prostate issues or neurological issues or issues around frailty, for example. But then on top of that, they have an additional layer of dementia-related causes. For example, they might struggle recognizing the signals that they need to empty their bladder or bowels. They might have difficulties finding or using the toilet or struggle with maintaining hygiene and so on. And then on top of that, the strategies people commonly use to manage continence, such as toilet mapping or preemptively using the toilet before going out or using continence pads, might not be straightforward for somebody with dementia. So supporting people with dementia needs, it has an overlapping but different approach compared to supporting someone of the same age without dementia. And one thing I'd like to stress is that continence and toilet use problems are not just associated with late stage dementia. Many people start having issues in the middle stages, and of course people in the earlier stages might already have underlying continence problems from physical causes. So just starting to look at carers' perspectives in this first half of the webinar. So after undertaking 26 interviews with carers about continence problems, we designed a survey to collect a wider range of views on the causes and consequences of continence problems for carers of people living with dementia. And we had 113 carers respond. Unsurprisingly, most were female, around half were adult children, a third spouse, and others were a sibling, friends, daughters-in-law, and one ex-spouse. The majority were caring for people with both urinary and fecal incontinence, and around 30 were looking after someone with urinary only, and 5 with fecal only. So when I'm talking about urinary only, so that's bladder leakage, and fecal is obviously bowel leakage. And these on the slide here were the main groups of causes of incontinence based on the carers' views. And they told us that there were often, they felt more than one cause, and they might vary from day to day. So for example, one day someone might not recognize that they need to empty their bladder or bowel, but the next day they do. Or they might have a problem with stress incontinence and also struggle to reach the toilet in time because they're unsure of where it is or what to do when they get there. Not remembering toilet processes was an issue for a lot of people. For example, problems with remembering how to use toilet paper or to manage clothing. So this slide drills down more into individual problems, more specific problems, and the varying impact that they had on carers. So again, this is from the carers' perspective, and it's based on the survey of 113 people when they were asked more detailed questions. And you can see here that the issue that caused problem for most people, with 2/3 of respondents reporting that it affected them to a great extent or somewhat, with problems maintaining toilet-related hygiene, for example, wiping, which is not something we necessarily would have predicted. Other key problems were refusal to accept help, problems with the use of pads, such as declining to use them, removing them, or disposing of them in the wrong place, and also repetitive rituals around toileting. And this could be things like shredding toilet paper, repeated toilet visits, repetitive hand washing. And the purpose of gaining this very detailed understanding of the problems faced, it was to help us to start developing interventions, so ways of potentially tackling these very specific problems. And Barbara will talk a bit more about that in a moment. So related to this, we also asked carers to tell us about their biggest incontinence related challenges. And you can see here there's a really wide range from the practical, for example, dealing with damage to the home or from poorly contained urinary or fecal leakage, to the physical toll, and this could be linked with cleaning, doing laundry, or helping the person with their hygiene needs, through to psychological challenges, perhaps relationship problems, and also, importantly, negative emotions associated with managing the incontinence. And these could include embarrassment, shame, or disgust. So just looking at the impact that these problems had on carers, one of the biggest issues highlighted was the impact that the continence management could have on the relationship between the person with dementia and the carer. And I should say, and actually this slide, I apologise, this slide doesn't actually talk about that, but and I should say it wasn't always a negative impact. Some carers talked about the privilege that they felt in looking after their loved one. But for many, the combination of dementia and continence care did cause a deterioration in their relationship. And this was often made worse if the carer couldn't understand why the incontinence was happening or when it was happening and what to do to prevent it. And this in turn could lead to ethical dilemmas. And to illustrate how, I'm going to talk in detail about one specific ethical dilemma that, that family carers of people living with dementia frequently face around problems using the toilet and declining care. And I'm going to use the case of Sally and Anne to talk through this in more detail and discuss the concepts. And the case I'm talking about today is based on a real situation that I was told about when interviewing people living with dementia and their carers about these challenges of the combination of continence and dementia. And I've changed the names, but the quotes that I'm going to give you shortly are verbatim. So let me introduce you to Sally and Anne. Sally is Anne's mother. She's 85. She has mid-stage dementia, mixed Alzheimer's and vascular. She is mobile around the house. She's a very sociable woman, enjoys seeing her many friends and family, and has shared a house with Anne for a couple of years. Anne works from home and supports her mother. She's coming to terms with her role as a carer rather than just as a daughter. The main problem with this role from Anne's perspective is that Sally doesn't always recognise the need to use the toilets, and this is an issue with both bladder and bowels. She doesn't remember that this is frequently a problem for her, and she doesn't want to use the continence products that Anne has bought for her. So these issues are becoming more frequent and more problematic, and are causing Anne considerable issues. And Anne has tried a range of strategies, and as she sees it, she has three options. And from what she told me, her option number one is to several times a day to assertively tell her mother that she must go to the toilet and to escort her mum there. The problems with this are that it can cause arguments, and Sally can become distressed and upset. The advantage is that Sally rarely has leakage with this option. In option two, Anne regularly suggests that Sally should use the toilet, so she suggests it rather than assertively insisting on it. And this option means that Sally is still annoyed with her daughter. Sometimes she does go to the toilet, sometimes she doesn't go to the toilet and can end up having leakage. And this can make Anne frustrated and upset. The third option is that Anne doesn't mention toilet use. And that means Sally can have leakage, sometimes several times a day. Anne deals with the laundry and the cleaning and is also worried about the house smelling. So as you can see, none of these options are ideal. And Anne is exhausted. She's exhausted from the cleaning, but also from the emotional and mental load and the impacts on her relationship with her mum. So how would you support her, or what do you think about these options, and is there any advice you could give? I'm going to stop in a minute and pause to ask whether you have any comments or questions on this ethical dilemma or anything that I've been talking about so far. But before I do that, just to give a little bit more of understanding of the impact that these problems are having on Sally and Anne, there are 3 quotes from Anne about her experiences over the couple of weeks before I spoke to her. So the first quote from Anne: "I smelt something and went upstairs, and she'd had an accident. She'd walked it all along the bedroom, all into the landing, into the bathroom. And that happened twice. And each time it took me 3 hours to clean it. Last week, one day I washed 4 pairs of trousers, and 2 of them she wet while I was sitting with her, despite all my efforts." And finally, "I'm sure there are some carers who just shout and rave at them because, well, you are you and you get so stressed." So what would you advise Anne to do, or what do you think is the best option for Anne? What would you do in similar circumstances? I'm just going to pause here and ask if anybody has any thoughts about this or any comments or questions on what we've presented so far. So I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts at this stage, whether they're in the chat or if anybody wants to speak. Beth, I can't see the chat.
That's absolutely fine. I can. So we have Tara who's saying option 1, best one to take the hit of Sally being annoyed. At least she is going to be dry. So far it's the feeling of option 1. That's the way to go. What does everybody else think?
I also should say there's option 2 of something else. If you have something else that's worked or something else that you think could be a better option.
Absolutely. Share your thoughts. Let's give people a couple of minutes. Here we've got another one. Debbie, option 2, as it gives Sally some level of control. So that's to prompt her mother to use the toilet. What does everyone else think? You can just put a number in the chat if you don't want to give your reason. Alison says option 2, to let her mum keep some independence. John saying offer it as suggestion and offer to support. So presumably option 2 is what we're saying there. Cara says try different continence care equipment, question mark. Miles is saying a mixture of option 1 and option 2 and maintaining routine. Debbie, try other continence products. Option 2 is less distressing than option 1. Kath is option 2. Sarah is option 2, but the better option for both individuals. Catherine, I relate to Sally and Anne. It reminds me of Ello, but I found reliable continence products. Sorry, the chat keeps skipping because so many people are now contributing, which is great. I change him in the morning, after lunch, and before bed daily. So Lynn says option 2, as it will give her more control and help prevent skin deterioration and sores, make Sally more comfortable. Kirsty, Laura are both option 2, as is someone called iPad, who I'm sure it's not their real name. Karen, visual prompts, mixture of option 1 and 2. Margaret, she could try period pants instead of continence products. Debbie, so hard when mother-daughter relationship gets clouded by intimate care needs, which I'm sure you would absolutely both agree with. Linda's saying option 1, try to get the balance of the needs of Sally and Anne. Christopher saying have an open conversation and see what her mum wants to happen and how she wants to be supported with it. And Helen is saying 4, which is really exciting. We've got a 4. Helen is saying, are continence products being used effectively? Are there medications that are contributing to the incontinence? I think Helen might be an Admiral nurse. I'm not sure. I think there is an Admiral nurse with that name. Razia is trying continence pads with option 2. And Claire is saying contact continence team for support. So there's a real wide variety of views there, but I think it would be fair to say the majority is saying option 2.
Option 2. Okay, thank you for that really helpful summary, Beth. I think it also highlights that it's not straightforward, and it's not black and white, and different people are probably imagining themselves in different scenarios on what might have worked for them or what they've seen work in other cases as well. And just I say completely agree. Obviously, everybody should be assessed for any reversible causes of continence problems. Absolutely. And then if they're not reversible, everybody should be properly assessed for the right continence problem products, and also toilet use aids as well, if relevant, to help them maintain independence and be supported as well as possible. Absolutely.
Cathy, we have another comment in the chat just before you continue, and it's somebody with personal experience. Catherine says she's tried all of these, but to no avail, and make them go. Husband refuses to use B&B products, costing a fortune, having to replace flooring. So it is, I'm sure, a story you're not unfamiliar with that you will have heard from carers.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be hugely, hugely challenging and so variable day to day. Yeah, very hard. So I'll just tell you what Sally and Anne did do, and it's not option 2. It was in fact option 3, which I don't think many, if any, people suggested.
Nobody suggested option 3, Cathy, no.
So, well, Anne decided that the damage to her relationship with her mother and the distress that it caused to both of them was worse than the consequences of her mum not making it to the toilet reliably. But I would say, of course, that the dynamic nature of this decision should be noted. And this was Sally's decision when I spoke to her, which was at one particular moment in time. And it's quite possible that that changed as the situation fluctuated and issues progressed. I don't know. But at that point, that was her. That was the least cause of distress to both of them, was that option 3, which I found fascinating. And it just goes to show, I think, the importance of the relationship, sometimes over and above everything else. So that's where I'm going to finish most of what I'm talking about today. And I'm going to hand over to Barbara, who's going to explain more about the work that we're doing to hopefully try and help with some of these incredibly challenging problems.
Thanks, Cathy. And hello, everybody. And like Cathy, I'm also a nurse by background, and I've been working with Cathy for just over a couple of years on this programme. And it's been a really great privilege to work with her and the rest of the team. It is a great team. So, as you've heard, we're very aware that when you're dealing with continence, when you have dementia, it is different than if you don't have dementia at the same time. And so what we're trying to do with our programme is to support people with dementia, with continence issues, in order to help them maintain independent toilet use for as long as possible, to maintain and achieve social continence so that they don't become isolated, because we know this is one of the reasons why people stop meeting people and staying at home and becoming more and more isolated. And if they do become incontinent, to help them cope with it, manage it as effectively as possible. And we should also say here that it isn't inevitable that because you have dementia that you will become incontinent. Cathy mentioned that you are more likely to become incontinent if you have dementia than if you don't, in comparison with your peer group. But it isn't by any manner of means an inevitability, and I think it's important to say that. And what we're trying to do is develop some resources for key groups of people because their needs are slightly different in terms of the information that they need in order to help them support people with dementia in this issue. So healthcare professionals have certain information that they would like in order to help them manage it better with their support, as indeed do home care workers and family carers, and also people with dementia themselves, who also have requested that they have some resources to help them do this by themselves, as it were. Next slide, please, Cathy. So we've been working with this program. Well, Cathy's been leading this program, and I've been working with it, as I say, for just over a couple of years now, working with a number of different people, different stakeholders, people with dementia themselves, family carers, and home care workers. So the initial survey that Cathy was talking about was really undertaken to really understand what the issues are, what are the problems, what needs to be done, what would people like to have more information about, so that we could develop resources that were tailor-made. And the programme started off by developing the resources for carers, and in doing so, they were identifying to us that they wanted more health care professional help, talking to people with healthcare, the healthcare professionals. They themselves were saying that they could do with some resources. So that's how we first started the first phase of what we called the DEMCON project. There are other projects going on. One of them is to do with assistive technologies, and Cathy will mention a little bit more about that later on. I haven't been involved in that area of work, so I make no apologies for not saying anything about it. And then we're looking to move on to developing the resources for home care workers and people with dementia. So I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. Next slide, please. So this was a graphic that Cathy put together earlier last year, which really puts it together very nicely as an overall graphic to see where we're going and what we've done. So the original DEMCON project, which we now call DEMCON 1, as I say, was for developing resources for family carers and for healthcare professionals. And we did that through talking to a lot of various people with dementia, family carers, home care workers, and healthcare professionals, particularly GPs and community nurses and allied healthcare professionals with continence specialist knowledge. And from that, we were able to develop packages for both family carers and for the healthcare professionals. Of course, when you do any of this sort of work, as I'm sure you're very aware, it's important to find out what do we already know, what is already out there, what have other people learnt. So alongside this, we weren't trying to reinvent the wheel or do what people have already done. So by looking at the literature of what's already out there and what we know, we were able to build on that and develop bespoke resources for the family carers and for the healthcare professionals. And they look slightly differently, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. And in talking further to carers, healthcare professionals, home care workers, it became very clear that the home care workers and the people with dementia themselves were saying, well, actually, this is all very well and good, but we could do with having some bespoke resources for us because our needs are different. And we were also told very clearly that in order to make our work more accessible to people, we should think of moving away from just being as text heavy as we are at the moment, and think about developing other sorts of resources through multimedia. So things like videos, things like having illustrations, so that we can actually be even more accessible to all of the groups. So the DEMCON 2 project, which is where we're at now, is, and we've just started that, it's a 2-year project, so running all through 25 and 2026, will be to fill in the blue gaps, if you like, the bespoke resources for home care workers, people with dementia, and the multimedia resources. Okay, next slide, please. So the first tranche of our work culminated in the DemCon website. That is the URL for it. If you're interested in going to have a look at it, please do. This is what the home care page looks like. And you can see that we've got 4 different buttons there: information for people with dementia and information for home care workers. And if you press those at the moment, if you go on the website, you'll see that it says these sites are under development. And if you go to the information for carers and family members and for healthcare professionals, that will you see there, you will see the culmination of the work that we've done so far. What we've tried to do is keep a sort of colour coding through these different sections, so that at the moment there are 2 that you can scroll through, so that you can have a sort of sense of where you're at, because I'm sure you'll be very familiar with being on websites and then sort of scrolling through and getting lost and thinking, where am I? Am I in the right page? Am I even in the right chapter, as it were? So we try to colour coordinate and colour code these pages as you go through them. And if you press the button for carers and family members, next slide please, Cathy, you will see that this is the introductory page about the guide for, and these are for family carers. So down the left-hand side, you'll see a menu. Here you can see that there's 14 sections for family carers. And this is building on the original work that came from the data of from the survey that Cathy did and her colleagues then, and the sorts of challenges that came up in something like the second or the third slide this afternoon, where people were saying these are the sorts of things that we need help with, these are the sorts of things that we would really value more information about. And often, of course, people are trying to get some information when it feels almost like crisis point. We've had people say to us, we really want to have a website whereby we want some answers very quickly. So you can click on these different sections and just get some pithy information. And then there's more detailed information when you've got more time, or if you're doing this in your own leisure, to look at it in more detail. So each of our sections have got these headlines. They've got quotes from carers and from healthcare professionals, which are again are verbatim quotes from the work that we've done. And in our evaluation of this original work, we were told that it was very helpful to be able to read those quotes, because people could relate to them, and it made them feel not quite so alone. Next slide, please. So this is the start of the materials for healthcare professionals. And as you can see by looking at the left-hand side, that there are fewer sections here. And this is very deliberate. This is because healthcare professionals were saying to us, yes, we don't have enough information. We don't know enough about the nuance between helping our patients with dementia and continence and helping other patients who have continence issues. So we recognize that we need to have some information that really will help us support our patients better and their carers, but we don't have a great deal of time. And again, we want to have real sort of pithy information that we can read absolutely quickly. And then if there's more detailed guidance behind that, then we can go from our sort of 30-second to 3-minute to 5-minute read when we've got more time to do that. And we've also put links throughout these different sections in the 2 that we have so far, so that actually we haven't repeated the information, so that as you go through this, if you go onto the website and you go through these different sections, you will see links. And you'll also see links to different websites as well. So we're hoping that we're giving information that is very valuable, that people can access very, very quickly, but also that there is more there for them to go to when they want to spend a little bit more time browsing. Next slide, please.
Oh, what's happened? There we are.
There we go, thank you. So the other thing about how we've designed the website, so again, if you go to the left-hand side and have a look at the menu bar, you can see that when you're on the page, it actually lights up. The banner lights up. So here we're on the Continence products, chapter 4. And also, if you notice, there's a tick there at the side. And these ticks remain as you're scrolling through at a particular visit. So what this is telling me is that this is the first section that I've clicked on. If I then go and click on, say, going out and about, what will happen is that out and about will sorry, I can't read it, 14, that will light up, but the tick will remain in the Continence products. So I can just get a little bit of sense of what I've already read today, so that I don't keep going back and having to remind myself, because I'm the one that's trying to retain some of this information. So I know where I've actually been. But once I log out of the website today, or I might come back to it later today, I will find that all those ticks have disappeared. And so it's just sort of an extra navigation aid for while I'm on the website right now. We try to make these sections quite short so that there's nothing more than 3 pages long. And as I say, so that people can access it quite quickly. But there is more detailed information for when you have time to go and look at it. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so that's where we've got to with our Dementia website so far. And as I said a moment ago, we are now working on developing the resources specifically for people who have dementia and for home care workers. And we're also working on developing our multimedia resources. And I'm going to ask Cathy just to mention, to say a little bit about the other pieces of work that fit into this big program that she's actually leading, because she'll have much more information about it than I do.
Thanks, Barbara. So yeah, so we hope to pull together a bigger package of interventions, a bigger package of things that specialist services like continence services and dementia services, particularly in the community, will be able to access and tailor to individuals as they need them. As we've seen, everybody's different in the problems that they face with this. There is a huge variety, and we're trying to produce I'm not keen on the word toolkit, but that's kind of what it is a toolkit that specialists can use together with a person with dementia and carers to try and find solutions to their particular problems. And as well as the information resources for the different groups of people, there's a couple of different areas that we're looking at. One of those is stigma reduction. So in many other conditions, many other stigmatizing conditions, whether that be mental health conditions, whether that be skin conditions, all sorts of different conditions where the person experiencing it experiences stigma. There have been what are called stigma reduction interventions developed. And these are ways of trying to reduce the negative emotions that are associated with stigma and find ways for the person to deal with them. So, for example, if somebody is living with the fear of having an accident and that's stopping them going out, are there any ways that they could be supported to overcome those emotions and to try and continue with their normal activities as much as possible, and to try and stop incontinence limiting their lives as much as possible? So that's one area we're looking at. Another really important area is access to assistive technologies. And by this, that can be anything from a commode to a continence pad to a handheld urinal, to an automatic toilet flusher. It can be a vast range of things. And the fact that it is a vast range of things, and we've got up to, I think the latest count, 168 different categories of continence or toilet related assistive technologies, means that nobody has the full understanding of all of these different categories of assistive products that could potentially help different groups of people with different things. So what we're trying to do, well, what we have done is mapped all of these products with the problems that they're designed to solve. And now we've just been funded to start work on exploring with health and social care practitioners and people experiencing continence and carers to find out the best ways about supporting people to get the right products to meet their needs in their homes. So that's 2 other areas that we're looking at. Over to you, Barbara. Shall I move on to the next slide?
Yeah, please. Thank you very much. Thanks for that. Okay, so if call to action, if there's anybody here that is interested in getting involved, or they know of people that you think might be interested in getting involved, or you'd like to share this information with them, what we're looking for is to co-create these resources for people with dementia and home care workers. And as with the other resources that we've developed already, we need to understand what it is that people are actually needing, what sort of information do they need, what would be useful for them, find out what would encourage them to use the website. If we develop the resources for them, will they use them? What would stop them potentially from using the website? We need to understand all of these sorts of issues in order to then develop our bespoke resources. We then will, having done a prototype, we will ask people to test them out, see how usable they are, if they're useful, what would they prefer to have, what's missing, what isn't useful, so that we can really tailor them so that when we put them on the website and it goes live at the end of next year, they're resources that, to the best of our ability, people will find useful and will use them. And also we will be needing feedback on the multimedia resources that we develop in the different formats for similar questioning. Is it useful? Is it helpful? Is it the right sort of information that you're looking for? Is there something that we're missing that would be useful for you? So we are looking for people to get involved to help us. Next slide, please. We're particularly wanting to talk to people who do have a diagnosis of dementia, particularly if they're in their early to mid stages of the disease progression. It would be really beneficial for us if we can talk to as many people as we possibly can, recognizing it is a very difficult subject and it's not something that people will always want to talk about or think about. But we do need to talk to them. And we also want to involve as many home care workers as we can, speak to those people who've got experience of providing continence support, particularly to people with dementia, so that, again, we can start to develop these resources which are tailored for their own individual needs. Next slide, please. So just to conclude, we know that continence problems are a major cause of care breakdown and family relationship breakdown for people who are living in their own home with dementia. And we know that people want to remain as independent as they possibly can. And we know, and as Cathy mentioned earlier, it's not all doom and gloom. There are carers that feel very privileged to be able to do this for their loved ones. However, the burden can be quite great, and we want to be able to try and lessen that burden as much as possible. And we're doing that through the various programs of work and the interventions that we are developing. And we also are very well aware that there's a lot more that still needs to be done. And we will carry on with our programs and will really hope to be able to make a dent in this area, because it's such an important area and we think it's a little neglected to date. We would also like to acknowledge our thanks to the people that have worked with us to date and who have continued to offer their support of our work. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do it. We're very grateful for our funders as well, particularly the National Institute of Health and Care Research, who have funded all these programs. Again, without that support and that of the Alzheimer's Society and other people, we wouldn't be able to do this work. So it's really very important, and that we acknowledge that, which we do. So if there's anybody that is interested in knowing more about this, if you'd like to get in touch with us, if there's anybody that you can put in, that you think might be interested in talking to us, these are our email addresses, Cathy's and my email addresses at Southampton. We really would love to hear from you. And thank you very much indeed for your attention this afternoon. And now we'll go back to answering your questions.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. It was so informative. There are so many questions in the chat, I think more than we've ever had before presenters have even finished their presentation, which suggests to me that I need to have you ladies back on our webinar program in 2026 for you to share how much further you will have got with things by then, because I know as you've talked about, you have a lot of plans to continue to develop resources. I don't think we're going to get to all the questions, so I'm going to say that now. And I would urge people, if we don't get to your question, please do get in touch with Cathy or Barbara, particularly if you would like to support their work, because I know they are very keen. That call to action is a very real call to action for them, because they would really love your involvement. We will get to as many questions as we can. Before we begin, there was just one thing I wanted to ask myself. So we are having a webinar around environments this summer, and we know that things like signage to help people get to bathrooms and colours once we're in the bathroom can be very helpful for people in finding toilets, etc. Have you ladies experienced much around that in the research that you've done with carers?
It tends to be more useful in public settings or settings outside of the home. It can be useful in the home as well, and it can be like a combination of media. So it can be words or it can be pictures. Some work for people and not for others. It's possibly less important in people's homes than it is in hospital or a community setting or something where people are less familiar, is what I would say. And it also tends to be the default. What's useful is a sign on the door. And that is probably useful for a fairly small number of people for a fairly limited time, I would say. But it's certainly obvious. It is of use and important to have.
That's really
something else that we were told by one of the continence specialists last year, talking to her, was thinking about the colours within a bathroom, for example. So the bathroom suite. So if you've got a really nice colour coordinated bathroom suite and the walls and everything else, that actually that then starts to become confusing for somebody with dementia. So if you did something like change the toilet seat cover, for example, so that stood out. And also she mentioned putting colour on the edge of a wash basin. So then they weren't things that were obvious to me at all. But just to break up the contour helps the person with dementia actually physically see it in a slightly different way.
That's really interesting. Thank you.
I think there's a lot of trial and error, and what works for one person won't work for another, and so on in this. And then but it's just having those ideas, so you at least know that you're trying everything and that there's nothing obvious that's being missed. And in some cases, nothing will work particularly well. But yeah, there are lots of different things that can be done.
Super, thank you. Right, without further ado, let's get to all of the questions. So Linda's had her hand up for a while, so I'm going to come to Linda to ask her question, and then we'll start on some of the questions in the chat. Linda, you've had your hand up for about 10 minutes, I think. What would you like to ask?
Thank you. I'm really, really interested in this, and thank you very much indeed. I'd love to help. One of the areas I'm most interested in is older people, and amongst that cohort, particularly of older women, I was absolutely astonished to discover the degree of prolapse which you mentioned. What's bothering me is that it is almost unheard of in discussion, but not just amongst the public, but indeed in the NHS, and very often the resources attached to pelvic health don't allow. You may get bladder and bowel, you may not get them associated with gynae. As you know, there can be 3 types of gynae, urinary, and colorectal, or any combination of them. So I wondered if you were looking at any of that, as well as perhaps the drugs that are used in the neurodegenerative, where they have a very similar thing where mixed messages come from the bowel and stuff from, you know, people with MS or something like that. Thank you.
Completely agree. It's a massive problem. And it's come forward in the consciousness, not for necessarily good reasons recently, with the problems around mesh and so on, and the problems that they've caused. So some of the people in our team have done work in this area, looking at pessaries and the use of pessaries to support prolapse and things. But it's not an area where there is very, very limited work, even with pessaries, in the area of people with dementia and prolapse and all the issues around that. There's been quite a lot of work, I know, up in Scotland in this area. It's not a big area for our team in Southampton, but there is research in the area. But I quite agree, it needs to come up the agenda, and as is so often the case with women's health matters, it doesn't.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Linda. I'm going to need to move on because we have got so many questions. Let me do a couple more from the chat and then I'll try to get to Kate, who's also got her hand up. So there's lots of really nice comments as well, people saying thank you so much and this is really useful. Helen's asking, has any of your research with Continence team healthcare professionals touched on the potential links of donepezil contributing to a deterioration of continence? So obviously Alzheimer's, drugs predominantly prescribed for Alzheimer's disease, the links with continence. She did say a lot more. I'm not going to read it all out because I want to hear your answer.
Yeah, so we haven't specifically. I know there's a team over in Canada who have done some geriatrician who's done some work in this area, and there's a whole range of drugs that are used with people with dementia that cause continence problems. So anticholinergics, and vice versa, drugs that are used for bladder problems that are causing a deterioration, cognitive issues as well. So it's a two-way thing. So drugs to help with the cognitive issues are causing bladder problems. Drugs to help with the bladder problems are causing cognitive issues. So there is work going on in this area. It's not the specific area that we focus on, but we are aware of it, and certainly people with both of these problems should have a drug review.
And really interestingly, if you get a chance to have a look at it, Cathy and Barbara, Helen goes on to talk about the Bran analysis and how she helped somebody through, her team helped somebody through that. So it might be worth having a look at the chat, staying on at the end to have a little look at that. Claire's question, how would you go about getting the packs, please? So I think this is while you were talking about some of the products. How would you go about getting the packs?
Packs of products?
I'm assuming that's what Claire means. She hasn't said.
So if that's what the question is, so you can get trial packs of different types of products or different sort of sizes and things and types of products directly from the manufacturers if you contact them. So very well known one is obviously Tenor, but there are others. You can contact the manufacturer directly on their website and ask for sample packs. There's another website that we've developed in Southampton, which is specifically focused on continence products, and that's called it's www.continenceproductadvisor.org, and that's hosted by the International Continence Society, and it gives evidence-based, very detailed, independent advice on continence products. But because it's an international website, it doesn't take you to where you can buy them. To do that, you'd probably be best to go to a local, like tenor.co.uk or whatever it's called in this country. Yeah, so Essity make, so I've just seen in the chat, somebody said Essity. Essity are the manufacturer who make the product Tenor, and yeah, Tens is another a well-known one. Oh, somebody's put continence product advisor in. Thank you.
The chat is a little bit crazy today. It's more busy than I think it's ever been, which just tells me this is a really important topic, as we were talking about before we began. I'm going to come to you, Kate, in a second. I'm just going to ask Barbara's question. Can I ask about terminology? I was interested that the term leakage was used when the case study was being presented. My mum, age 92, who does not have dementia, struggles with her continence. She knows she needs to go, but has poor control and doesn't make it to the toilet in time. This is different from someone with dementia who doesn't recognize the signals, etc. Are there different descriptors or different types, causes of continence?
Do you want me to take that, Barbara, or?
Yeah, no, please do.
So there's a couple of things here. There's the terminology about how you talk about continence, and everybody's got opinions on that. And we have done quite a lot of work in collecting people. So what I mean is, are we talking about feces? Are we talking about poo? Are we talking about bowel leakage? Are we talking about wee, pee? So there's the language around that. But then I think perhaps but sorry, I forgot the name of the comment came from Barbara. Sorry. I think possibly what Barbara's talking about is the underlying cause of the continence and whether that affects how you manage it. And so there are things like stress incontinence that millions of people in this country live with, particularly women, particularly post-childbirth. And that might be what Barbara's talking about there. When you can't quite get to the loo in time, and you might have a bit of leakage when you sneeze or cough and so on, and it might be completely unrelated with the dementia. And another very common one is urge or bladder overactivity, where the bladder spasms and can cause leakage. And there are lots of other things as well, like constipation and poor mobility, which can cause functional incontinence. And yes, they do have different strategies around them. And just because somebody has dementia, it doesn't mean that their incontinence problems are caused by dementia. And a lot of it comes down to which management strategies work for that individual. So some people will tolerate pads, other people won't, which can be a big problem. Some people will very happily be prompted and asked to go to the toilet, and other people, as in the example I gave, won't. And yet it's a complicated onion to unpeel to get to grips with what's going to work for that particular person. So sorry, I can't be more specific about individual cases.
Super. Thank you, Cathy. Right, Kate, you have your hand up. I know you've got a question in the chat as well. I don't know if it's going to be something different.
I'm just thrilled to meet a professor of continence. I've been a district nurse in the 60s, so I mean, it's just wonderful to have this wealth of information. And we always talked about the nursing knowledge. I mean, this is just brilliant, just to hear and see. My question was really about where the services are based, because in my experience, actually helping somebody, assisting somebody to have an assessment of the kind you're describing is one of the big hurdles, and to be taking somebody to the incontinence service can often be not possible because of the stigma. So I wondered if there were possibilities explored in your research about home visits, and whether, given of course the enormous outlay that requires, whether the actual prevention or uptake of the service would be much better from that perspective. I'm sure you're onto all of these issues, but it was one that interested me.
Barbara, do you want to come in on that one?
Sure. So it's a lot of the help comes via going through the GP and getting a referral to the primary care, the most relevant primary care service, and they are, as you say, they're very difficult to get hold of. They're very understaffed, overworked, and all the rest of it. So that in itself is very difficult. There are sometimes people will go into the home. I'm not sure whether it's district nurses. I think district nurses get asked to help with the assessments, but then they will also refer to the continence service, and they can have help in their own home. How satisfactory that isn't really very clear to me from talking to the service users as well as the service providers. It's it's a difficult service to get good assessments from, but it could be, you know, people will be visited in their own home. They won't have to necessarily go to the service, but it would depend on their ability to mobilise. It would also depend on the service itself, where the service is actually based. If that answers your question.
An awful lot of the assessments are done via phone now. Huge number as well. It's depends on whether it's what they call it, what's called a tier 1 or a tier 2 assessment as well. But a huge number, particularly if they're what some services call PAD assessments, and they're done by HCA healthcare assistants over the phone often.
I think I can articulate Kate's view, and probably a lot of people on this call thinking that is really not satisfactory, and this is a bit of a Cinderella service, and people need something.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And I think particularly with people who have this combination of dementia and continence, I should add that, I mean, if for example, it's identified that an OT, as you know, occupational therapy assessment's needed or something like that, then that hopefully would take place in the home, because it would not make sense not to do that in the home. But yeah, it's very, very, you know, things changed during the pandemic and so on. And I think a lot of services realised they could get through some of their backlog on the phone, and it's kind of stayed that way. And they're in a hugely frustrating and difficult situation. I mean, you know, the people, the healthcare professionals we talked to about this are hugely frustrated. They're not thinking that this is a great service that they're providing.
So it's your research is going to be hopefully driving the policy changes that we really need. But anyway, thank you so much.
Exactly, Kate. That's exactly it. And trying to get continence and dementia services to work together as well to provide a more specialist service in this area, because we've heard about some services where you've got the continence team at one end of the corridor and the dementia team at the other end of the corridor, and never, you know, they never meet or discuss or anything.
Goodness, ladies, we are out of time, and I've probably got at least another 10 questions in the chat, and we are not going to get to them. So my greatest apologies to our audience that we simply have run out of time. We would probably need another 15 to 20 minutes to get through them all, and I can't possibly ask Cathy and Barbara to stay on that long, and we're going to end up with a really long recording. I think I might leave it as to say this has been such an important topic, and you've shared so much important information. And clearly there's a huge demand for this, that we would love to have you back for another webinar next year, and I will email you and see if we can arrange that. And in the meantime, I would just urge everyone, if you have an interest in this subject, if you would like to support the vital work that Cathy and Barbara are doing, please use their contact details. If one of you would like to just maybe pop those directly into the chat, your email addresses, so that people can easily harvest those to get in touch with you, to get involved in your work. That was it was an important part of today, as I really wanted to give people the opportunity to work with you as well, because I know you're looking for input as well. So I would just say a huge thank you. Thank you to you both for coming along. Thank you to our audience for your engagement, your amazing questions. So sorry we couldn't get to them all, but we will hopefully have another webinar on this topic. So thank you, Cathy, and thank you, Barbara, and our very best of luck with DEMCON.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So just before everybody abandons us, just to tell you, our webinar program continues apace. So on the 25th of March, which is our next webinar, we have support for people facing eating, swallowing and communication challenges. And that will be with the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists. Another crucial topic. So do grab your free ticket for that from our Eventbrite. My colleague David will pop a link in the chat for you if he hasn't already. He's already done it. Thank you, David. And then we have further webinars coming up in April. We've got culturally meaningful engagement in dementia care, so looking at the really important topic of EDI. And we are also going to be running an open space at the end of April as well. There are other webinars further ahead in our schedule that are also on our Eventbrite. So do go and sign up to everything that is of interest to you. And we look forward to seeing you again soon on a Dementia Community webinar. And thank you again to Cathy and Barbara. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.